Well, hey there, friends. I have a messy little, such a mess, a messy little video for you today. If you watched my recent goodies video last week, I talked about getting the Tyldwyck Tarot, the beautiful Tyldwyck Tarot, but really struggling to use it for readings because I had a hard time identifying what card was what. And I've been asking advice and sort of searching stores to figure out a way to, you know, bump up the titles a little bit on the card so that I could read it better. And I was searching and searching, and then someone suggested stickers, but I couldn't find anything that was the right size. And then, I thought I would write directly on the card, and I used the Winsor & Newton metallic pens, thinking that it would work. And actually, it they were still, the contrast wasn't strong enough so that I still couldn't see the titles, and it came right off with, like, a little bit of water. So I guess the good thing there was that I didn't have to live with it, being unhappy with it. And I didn't super want to write on these cards because, one of the reasons why this deck has sort of been like an obsession for me the last few weeks is because it's the most expensive deck I've ever bought, and that includes out of print decks. So I think, with shipping, this was a little over $100, which I don't usually allow myself. I think other than that, like, the most expensive deck I've ever bought is, I think I spent $50, $60 on the Vampire Tarot, the Robert M. Place Vampire Tarot. With shipping, Corte de Tarocchi may have been close, but I've never gone as much. In fact, there was a deck on eBay that I really, really want, the Robert M. Place Buddha Tarot, and it was $80, and I didn't let myself get it. So anyway, but also, aside from the cost of the deck, I also really, really like this deck. It's beautiful. But as I always say, and as I repeat time and time again, tarot is a functional art. And if it doesn't function, it doesn't matter to me how artistic it is. It's not, it likely will not stay in my collection for very long. So anyway, I thought a lot about it, and I was wandering the craft stores, and then I thought, oh, what about washi tape? Because it's super thin, and you can write on it, and it won't do much to bulk up the deck. And it's also kind of super forgiving, so that if I screw up, I'm not married to it, and if it doesn't look good, I can peel it right off, and it'll be fine. In fact, I've done that a few, so that's what I'm actually doing. But I mean, it really is super forgiving. Like, you can just rip it right off, and it doesn't do any damage. So that's what I've been working on the last couple hours. So where am I? Okay, yeah, you can see this. So literally, what I've been doing is just sort of, I'm gonna get this. No, I should be okay. It's gonna be weirdly framed because it's hard working around a tripod, as we all know. So I've just been sort of taking a strip of tape. I got these at Michael's. It came in this little dispenser, but I found that dispenser really irritating to work with. So I've been putting a strip right across the title of the card, and, going right across, actually, because I just felt that looked less like a Band-Aid, which ironically is exactly what it is. What card is this? The 7. It looked a little bit less like it looked sort of more like it belonged to be there, or it was designed to be there. And then writing the title on it with this pen. This is a Micron Pigma archival ink pen. It came in a set of 3. These were not cheap. I was gonna get the Pitt Artists pens, but the smallest one that came in was like a 0.1. And this came in a 0.02, 08, and 005. And I thought the thinnest one would be the one, but actually the 0.02 was great, so I probably could have just gotten by with my initial instinct, but whatever. So I write the name on it with that pen, and then I just sort of trim away the excess. I'm trying to go right to the edge, but I'm actually not beating myself up too much if I can't get there. And it's not easy. In fact, getting right to the edge is sort of more often a fluke. But what I've been doing is kind of pulling it away from the card a little bit and then going right up against it. That one I did pretty well. Nice demo. And that's it, really. So these are my last two. Because if this deck were not gilded, I would probably just slide the scissor right up along the edge, but I don't want to damage the gilding any more than I have done from shuffling it. So this is the last one. Now this is a deck that I had wanted for a while. I first saw it on, oh gosh, now I can't remember his name. I think it's Michael, the artist of the Oberfold Tarot. And I thought, oh, that's gorgeous. But it was so expensive. And then as I eventually do, I broke down and got it. And then I did a reading with it, and I found it really hard to see the titles. Now, I think it was Tammy Pie on Instagram who mentioned, you know, this deck is a little bit of a diva. See there, I don't know if you can see that, but I went a little over the edge, and I don't want it. I'd rather sort of have it come in further along the border of the card than have it go over the edge, just because I don't want it sticking to things on the outside. She called this deck a diva, but she said it's worth getting to know. I am also a diva, so, you know, I was likely to give up on it. You know, it's interesting in these days of kind of doctoring decks, because sometimes I think, oh, you know, would the artist want us to do that to their work? Although, as I frequently say, tarot is a functional art. But, you know, as an artist, I would rather have my work the way I made it, you know what I mean? Rather than have someone come along and futz with it. So, on the other hand, there were many times in the past, before we sort of landed in this world of doctoring decks, where I would just give up on a deck that didn't, you know, work the way I wanted it to, or that didn't have kind of what I, you know, wasn't giving me what I needed. So, in this case, you know, I feel like it's better than nothing, because it was either this or sort of never use it. I think it looks pretty good. Now you can see a little bit of bowing, you know what I mean? Because most of the tiles are at the top and the major arcana cards titles are at the bottom. But, you know, for the most part, it doesn't look all that bad. I'm going to shuffle it. You know, I've sort of test shuffled it, and it overhand shuffles just fine. So there's no, you know, it hasn't affected the shuffling. There is a little bit of catching when you riffle shuffle, although not a whole lot. So you can sort of feel it a little bit, the cards sort of catching on. Not a lot, you can sort of feel it sort of here and there in the deck. But if you're gentle in the riffle, it's not super bad. So, you know, again, I'm always at my worst shuffling. Can you even see that? I'm always at my worst shuffling when I'm making videos. It did thicken the edges of the deck a little bit. But like anything else, you know, sort of being conscientious about how we go about shuffling is wise. So let me go ahead and just sort of walk through a little bit of it. I actually haven't seen a lot of walkthroughs of this deck. So it's really non-traditional in a lot of ways. Well, in every way, really. I did each suit in a different color. So I got these sort of weirdly Easter egg colors because I thought I was just going to use the white. But then when I was testing it out on the majors, I used this pink because it's, well, I'll never use this pink. And it ended up looking good on the majors, so that's exactly what I used. I used purple for coins, gray for swords. I used this sort of turquoisey color for the cups, and then I used orange for the swords. Sorry, the wands. So anyway, you know, you can see it just sort of goes right across. This is strength, which is 11. It's called fortitude. Here's the Five of Swords. So I don't. Yeah, you actually can see the titles in the video. Five of Coins. It's an interesting deck because there are times where you can sort of immediately tell just by looking at the card what it is, but there are others that you can't. In the sword suit, whoops, sorry. Let's see, can I make this visible? You can kind of see these like whispers of the Marseille swords, which is, you know, it's a cute detail, but that doesn't make it super easy to see. And when I lay out a spread, you know what I mean? I want to be able to see how many of each suit I have so that I can get a sense of like the most active elements. I want to be able to see, oh, there's 3 5s, so this is a really disruptive event. You know what I mean? I want to be able to see all of that. So, and it wasn't easy with this deck. So you know, I have to say that for the most part, I actually really like the way this looks. I mean, color-wise, I did have to sort of settle for what was, you know, what I had. But, so here's an example of one where you can kind of see, if you know this is the suit of swords, you kind of get a sense of 3-ness. But it's very non-traditional in terms of its imagery. Although aces are like floors, the courts all have sort of a system. I have to go in and really kind of look at this deck closely now that I've done this, because one of the things that actually happens when I have a deck that I'm finding frustrating from a use point of view is that I have a hard time actually seeing what's on the cards, you know what I mean? Because I'm so sort of focused on what I wish were different about it. There's the Hermit. The Four of Swords. So whether you're reading white, you know, there's like little kisses of Waite-Smith. There's little kisses of sort of cartomancy in here. But there's also just sort of a general, like, lovely fuzziness, which I really sort of like, you know, for a deck. You know, if all decks looked the same, why would we need more decks? But I need to, you know, when something is so non-traditional as it is in this case, I really do need to be able to see what the titles are, so that I know what I'm seeing. Unless you use it, it's sort of more of an oracle deck. Here's another one where you kind of know there are 4 cups here. The Tower. I think this is photo collage. I honestly can't tell, but I kind of don't care. I mean, it really is. I think all the swords, I mean, all the knights are fireplaces, if I'm not mistaken, because of their association with fire. The Star. The Two of... I just think it's really beautiful. And again, having sort of put these titles on, I feel like I can see the deck now, you know, because I know what I'm looking at more easily, and I'm not sort of finding myself frustrated. Show you, you know, this is the back. So, I mean, it really does have a beautiful quality to it. It's glossy cardstock, which is not my favorite. I find that a little frustrating, but ... Nothing's perfect. It's just a brilliant idea. 9 of Cups. The World. The Fool. Temperance. It's making me happy to see these cards and sort of know what they are without having to, like, lean right into them. So let me actually see how, you know, this plays out, because one of the things that I found was that, whoops, very elegant. One of the things I found was that I wanted to be able to read with it, but wasn't having a good time doing that. So let me just sort of do a sample. Jeez. I just get so excited. hate shuffling. Oh, I'm using my own. I hate shuffling the tripod. Yoink. I also don't have the sturdiest tripod in the world, so that doesn't help. I love a tripod that, oh my god, that was like a boom mic, you know what I mean, where I could sort of like have it hang over without having to have it in the way. But now, I don't know that this is a long-term solution. We'll see how it wears with use. But the other thing I was thinking too is that, you know, if this deck and I do sort of get along well, and I get to know it well enough, I won't need to keep those titles on. I can always peel them off really easily. And if they do get peeled off, I can also replace them easily because it's just tape, and it, you know, it wasn't the end of the world. Having done this way, there's a couple other decks I sort of wonder if I might do. I'm thinking I have the German Margareta Peterson Tarot, and that one, you know, I could do this, although that deck is pretty hard to shuffle already, so adding to it may not give me the result. Jeez, I'm such a mess. So let's just do, you know, let's just do a simple. Six cards. Can you see that? Yes. Normally I would do 9 cards, but I obviously have a mess around me. So I can happily see the tiles of the cards really easily. Let me move this up a bit. So I can see the titles really easily. You may not be able to see them where you are. Boink, if I do that, you can. Which is nice. And you know, again, sort of now that I know what I'm looking at, I feel like I can sort of enter the reading a little bit more easily. Now, you know, without a question, I've talked about this many times, and as I've been working through this book that I'm working on, I'm realizing how I just really don't like doing general readings. I really just don't like it. I'll do them, you know what I mean? And I did one for a friend the other night, and I could just feel myself sort of thinking like, oh, this could be so much better if I knew what I was reading about. But, you know, again, like sort of being able to see this, I can look at this and say, you know, we start with the Tower, then the Six of Staves, and then Judgment. So there's this really exciting creative work, but it's sort of shaking things up and waking things up. So there's like a project that's happening that's really volatile, but probably in like a really good way. It's sort of awakening you to this like beautiful creative work. It's a very fiery time. It's a very powerful project. It's probably something that's going to take you, you know, a long way, and that, you know, may be the thing that actually changes your life, that, you know, makes people sort of see you in a new way, you know. And then the bottom row, we've got the Queen of Cups, the Two of Coins, and the Ace of Coins. It's going to be important to sort of be emotionally intelligent as you go through this process. And you're also going to be sort of dealing with the fact that financially things aren't going to be yielding all that much right out of the gate, you know what I mean? Because we've got a 2 and an Ace of Coins. So, you know, it's definitely planting the seeds of sort of long-term prosperity, but, you know, it's not going to sort of, the money, you know, people may see you in a new way, but the money's not going to keep rolling in or start rolling in right out of the gate. In fact, you may notice a little dip in your savings as a result. But, you know, if you are kind of emotionally intelligent in the way that you handle that, if you use your intuition, if you use your your sort of wisdom and your experience, you know, that life has given you, you should be okay. It is, you know, if I look at each pair, sort of it's emotionally volatile, but you're mature enough to handle it. It's sort of growing your passion, and also just your duty to the project is gonna become sort of more practical over time. So while it feels like creative right now, at a certain point, like, you're going to be pulled to the more responsibility toned, the more responsibility sort of angle of sustaining this. You know what I mean? You're going to be pulled in that direction a little bit more. And you're going to sort of wake up to a feeling of responsibility. You know what I mean? Like, responsibility and duty to what you've created. You'll suddenly have a greater sense of I keep using the word responsibility. That's the word, I really mean. You're gonna sort of feel very passionately like, oh, I've put this into the world, and it's my responsibility to care for it and to sustain it and help it become more than just a seed, to water it and let it grow, which is going to be a new thing for you, because this is such a volatile experience. So yeah, so I mean, that's just a quick sample reading with this. It's interesting because I don't, it's funny to think about sort of all the time and effort that gets put into something like this. This took me a couple hours. It wasn't the end of the world. It was moderately time consuming, but the images on the cards are sort of not, it's really the titles in a way that are most important to me, because the images are subsidiary to my understanding of what the cards mean numerologically, for the pips, and just contextually. It's an interesting thing. In the first sort of iteration of the reading that I did, when I looked at this bottom row, this was all about money, and that, I just sort of followed my nose, so to speak. When I read them as pairs, sort of down in columns, it became more about duty and responsibility. None of that is necessarily pictured here. It's just how I understand the suit of coins to be. There are times when it's money, and there are times when it's about duty and responsibility. And I know that only just by thinking about context. When I was looking at each pair, I was kind of thinking about this resting on this. So this awakening to duty, this creative beauty. 6 is beauty, passion. It's growth times 2. If we think about 3 as an element here, in fact, we have a 2, so that does sort of even suggest doubling that. Resting on the 2 of coins, which is about duality, partnership, coming together of responsibility, duty, growth. You know what I mean? So you just you listen to the cards, but the images ultimately were not, the main factor in the reading. Sorry, there's a little fuzz on that card. But they could be. You know what I mean? If I were to sort of look further into the cards, I would say, looking at the 6 with this architectural element, you're probably building something bigger than you are. You know what I mean? I think about the the builders of cathedrals sort of making something, they knew they may never actually see completed. When I look at the sort of pulley in the 2 of coins here, I think, it's gonna be a lot of work. This pull that you're gonna feel, to engage in this project responsibly, maybe a little bit of a struggle, because it's, you want to sort of think in terms of the beautiful aspect of it and not the daily aspect of it. So the images can play a part, but kind of initially, as I'm reading these days, what I'm actually thinking of is the combination of the number and the element. And then when it's a major arcana card, I'm thinking a lot about how it plays into life. You know what I mean? There was a time in my reading where I sort of always viewed the trumps as these spiritual experiences. And I think in this case, because this is sort of a, we get this weight, I think this project is a spiritual experience, but I think we mostly experience life in life, and unless we're like super duper in tune with the larger spiritual world, we our spiritual moments tend to happen in really banal ways. I think I think of the name of that Barbara Streisand song, "Ordinary Miracles," and for me, I guess the trumps are in that way. I'm trying to sort of find a little bit more of an ordinariness to them, so that I can make them make sense. You know, this if this were a real reading and this were a big project, it certainly would clearly be a very big moment in this person's life. You know, if you think back at what I said about it, it's shaking things up completely in the tower, and it's waking them up to a new sort of vision, and it may in fact wake the world up to their own vision, which is an incredibly spiritual thing. But it's rooted in this idea of this project that you're really finding beautiful and that you're really working on, you know, hard. And what's nice about this reading in particular is that these two coins cards kind of ground us away for, you know, into the practical. So anyway, I'm just rambling now about about reading because I'm thinking about all this stuff. But so that is how I've managed my relationship with the Tyldwyck Tarot so far. But so far, I'm pretty glad I did it. You know, I think this may make this deck far more usable for me now than I was worried before. So, as always, thank you for watching, and be well, and I'll see you soon.